When you're hiring, it feels amazing to finally close out a job search. But what if you could get rid of the search and just match? You can with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and yes, I'm still on vacation. I'm sure I've missed some White Sox news while I've been away. Today, I'm sailing from New Zealand to Australia, and I figured what a perfect time to talk about a topic I've wanted to do a show about for a while. I'm fascinated by Australian baseball. We've seen some major leaguers from down under. Obviously, for the White Sox, the most notable is Liam Hendriks. Growing up in Wisconsin, I got to watch Dave Nielsen mash for the Milwaukee Brewers in the 90s, and he made the All-Star game in his last season in the majors back in 1999. Nielsen, by the way, is currently the manager for Australia's national team. Australian baseball is overshadowed by Japan and South Korea, but with each passing World Baseball Classic, the Aussies are getting better. And this upcoming college baseball season, a preseason All-American is making some noise while climbing up the draft rankings to be the first Australian ever taken in the first round. Joining the Sox Machine podcast is one of our long-distance friends. He's been one of our supporters for quite some time, and for the Aussies listening to this episode, you could listen to him on the Sports Discussion podcast. It's AJ Mithen, and hey, AJ, thanks for joining the Sox Machine podcast.
Josh, I can't lie, this is a big thrill. Been listening to Sox Machine for many, many years, and it's about time we got to talk some Aussie ball on it, so let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So with you living in Australia, I have to ask, how did you choose the Chicago White Sox as your team to follow?
Oh, it's an interesting story. Back in the probably early 90s, 1991, I started getting into playing baseball, but there wasn't any baseball on TV here. You had to basically check the papers for a series result. You couldn't get a game-by-game result or anything like that unless you had relatives over there who could dial it back to you. That all changed pretty quickly when dial-up and everything came along. But yeah, I started off, there was a baseball shop near me that I went in there, and David Clarkson, who was a catcher for Australia, owned it. And we were talking about the game there, and then I kind of fell into the White Sox through that. So been a White Sox fan ever since, probably 1991, but it has just been tricky until probably mid-90s, late 90s to start keeping up with what was actually happening on the field. I was just kind of, I like the White Sox, I got a cap. But could I name you a player? I could do maybe Aussie, Frank, a couple others. But, from there, it was until we were able to get more information to us. It was, I'm making it sound like we were, some sort of archaic sort of setup miles away. But we were back in the early 90s. But, yeah. But, no, much easier now to watch the Sox stink it up.
Yeah, on that note, for Americans that love rugby, rugby wasn't that big of a thing in the 90s in the States unless you played in college. So if you wanted to follow what's happening in the Rugby World Cup, they had to pay incredible fees for pay-per-view back in the satellite dish era. So I totally understand. I mean, that's a good time to become a White Sox fan. I mean, 93, the ALCS team, Frank Thomas, as you mentioned. Yeah, that's also when I became a White Sox fan. And in the United States, when it comes to the sport of baseball, it used to be the national pastime, but I think that's clearly American football, and basketball in some ways has passed baseball in popularity. So the sport of the States has a growth issue, and that's what they're trying to focus on, AJ, is how can we grow the sport of baseball again? From an outsider's perspective, me, dumb American, when I think of Australian sports, it's rugby, cricket, Aussie rules football, which I love to watch, but I don't know what is going on, and Olympic swimming. When it comes to baseball, how well is the sport received in Australia?
Well, it's received really well, but there's kind of a hierarchy here in Australia of sport. Australian rules football is king. That gets like the one and a half or almost $2 billion broadcast deal here for television, online, radio, all that sort of thing.
Wow.
I think that's about $50 American at the moment. But then there's rugby league, which is a different form of rugby. There's rugby union as well, but cricket is also there as well. So the top three would be Aussie rules is the top. Then you'd have rugby league. Then you have cricket, but they would probably be the same. And they take all of the money for broadcasting. They take all of the reporters for sports reporting. They take basically all of the oxygen out of the sports broadcasting room. So there is huge support here for baseball. Both, it's latent. You'll see merch everywhere when you're here. There's everyone's got an MLB team, but not everyone necessarily has an ABL, an Australian Baseball League team. And a lot of people don't actually realise that the Australian Baseball League is a thing. So when guys like Liam Hendriks sign a deal for 71 mil our money, that makes waves over here because he was earning more than Ben Simmons, which also makes waves here because a lot of the American sports in Australia gets judged by how much someone's getting paid. So we might Trav Bazzana in a little bit. The focus on him is not that he'll be Australia's first round pick, but it's the money he's likely to get that makes the headlines. But there's probably baseball's a top 50 sport for participation. And it doesn't sound great, but everything from about 5 down is just similar numbers altogether. But for 15-year-olds, kids under 15, it's around 20th. So it's kind of kids come up with t-ball, they come up with a bit of baseball, and then when they get older and they want to run into things, they end up going to rugby league or Australian rules or something like that. And sometimes they'll come back to baseball, often they won't. A lot of the players who are in the cricket team at the moment grew up on baseball, which is why 37 Aussies have played in the major leagues, but only 13 of them have been position players because Aussies seem to come over like the punters for the NFL. They seem to be all Australian. It seems we can only produce pitchers, but that might change with Bazzana. But there's huge support for it, but it never seems to manifest in huge crowds at the ABL. People writing to broadcasters saying, "Hey, where's the baseball?" That sort of thing.
Got it. So I'm curious because, like, in the World Baseball Classic this past year, Australia made their announcement to the party in a big way, like shocking South Korea, beating them 8-7 in the opening game, one of the better games of the tournament. And the Aussies reached the quarterfinals where they couldn't overcome Yohan Bakata, who was playing his best baseball, unfortunately for Team Cuba and not the White Sox, in 2023. But that was a really tight game, and unfortunately Australia lost 4-3. But they reached the quarterfinals. Was this past World Baseball Classic performance one that could help build momentum for the Australian Baseball Federation, and did it garner more interest locally?
It definitely raised awareness, yes. They made the news, made the news for on-field things, which is good because normally if you see baseball in the news, it's because there's been, someone's charged a mound and there's benches cleared or something like that. Or like I said, someone's getting paid heaps of money. So when they got the results on the field, that kicked off. Baseball Australia's social media presence went through the roof. They got all sorts of engagement and numbers and all those sort of things that they want. How did it go for growth here, though? That's an interesting question. I don't know how you quantify it because there's no numbers for participation out yet. Because they made the quarterfinals, they got given about 600 grand Australian for making it that far, which for Australian baseball is a huge windfall. And the intent was that would go into, talent identification pathways and those sort of things for the sport here. It's interesting here in that the focus of Baseball Australia are the national teams, really, rather than the Australian Baseball League, which is kind of run as its own thing. So a lot of the push, a lot of the PR, a lot of the aspirational things that are done in baseball in Australia are to make the national team, and that's like a sporting cultural thing here. The idea is to Australia loves their sporting team, so whatever sport it is, the pinnacle of that is to get into your national team. And for Australian baseball in particular, where not everyone is guaranteed an MLB shot, or that level of cash, then going to these tournaments is the goal, is the aim. So being able to say, I mean, this has happened before. Australia won a silver medal in the 2004 Olympics with Dave Nielsen, who actually retired from MLB to come and play in Australia to try and build the game. Liam Hendricks has also said he's keen to build the game up and come back. But it's, I guess, the success of it all rides on the success of the national teams across all levels, because that also gets the points to be in competitions like the Premier 12, which is like World Cup Junior. Right. I think starts next year. But things like that are really important to get the national team up in lights so that kids can see, I can play, I can go to the Olympics, I can play in the World Baseball Classic, I can do, and then I can get seen, and then maybe I can go off and get a contract somewhere.
Yeah, because there's the international play that you mentioned, and you talked about the Australian Baseball League, and it's intended to be a winter league alternative to the Dominican Winter Ball League. So if you're a minor league player and you don't feel comfortable living in the DR because of the language barrier, well, you can go play baseball in Australia. What's the level of competition been like for the Australian Baseball League, AJ?
Well, you'd probably peg it at about high A, double A from a quality point of view. And that's mainly because a lot of prospects come over, get sent over by MLB clubs. Some ABL teams have partnerships with major league clubs. Like Perth has Tampa, Brisbane has Milwaukee, Canberra have Toronto, but there's also a lot of Japanese and Korean prospects who come over as well. So you're getting a good, decent level of competition, and it's worth getting looked at too, because there's more than 70 people have gone from the ABL, not just Australians, have gone from the ABL up into the bigs. And like Stone Garrett, who's playing at the moment, played in Sydney here. White Sox icon Jacob May played for Sydney as well. Yusei Kikuchi played here. Didi Gregorius played here. Kevin Kiermaier played here. Mike Brousseau played here. Rhys Hoskins, played here. And so did Ronald Acuna. He came out here when he was 17, his first pro outing. And you could tell he was much better than everyone else. But that's the sort of player that we get to come along from the imports. Junior Caminero as well played out here just last year, 2 years ago.
Oh, nice.
Before he came out to go there. So you're getting good entertainment. The Aussie players then have to match that level coming in, so their skills up as well, which stirs the whole pot, and everyone's okay. So it's a good night out. You get good quality game, and yeah, it's a lot of the time people will come. Yeah, there's a lot of American independent ball players who come out as well because they want at bats, they want innings, right, to get seen by scouts and all that. There's a lot of scouts in Australia. John Diebel, who used to be the national coach, now coaches the Melbourne Aces. He's Pacific Rim scout for the Dodgers. Howie Norsetter is out here as well from Philly, and he used to be at Minnesota. So there was a lot of Aussies going through Minnesota for a period of time when Howie Norsetter was working with them. So there's a good pathway there if you're good enough in the ABL to get back up into something, a bit of a higher level up in the bigs. Yeah,
because right now, as we're recording, former New York Yankees first baseman Greg Bird, if you remember Greg Bird, podcast listeners, is leading the ABL in home runs. So when I'm up late at night and I'm seeing highlights from the Australian Baseball League on Twitter, it's like every day it's Greg Bird did something. I'm also curious about an Aussie, Alex Skepton. He's 22 years old. He's an outfielder. And AJ, he's hitting 414 with a 474 on base percentage and slugging 743. I don't care what level of baseball it is. When you have an OPS over 1200, that's going to garner some attention. Again, he's only 22 years old and he's played in some of the U18 tournaments for Team Australia. He's not with any minor league teams right now. He's not associated with any teams in Major League Baseball. So when I see someone like Alex Skepton and where the White Sox currently are, as far as rebuilding the organization with the new front office, like these are some of the diamonds in the rough that I want them to go after, AJ, because for years we know that the White Sox have had no problem throwing millions of dollars at unproven Cubans who are older than 20 years old, and they never reached the majors. Like, yes, Luis Robert made it, Yohan Makata made it, Jose Abreu made it, but any of the single-digit millions of dollars like Yoki Cespedes, they have not made the major leagues, and I just feel like you're just throwing away millions of dollars, which we all know that Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't like losing or wasting money at all when it comes to signing prospects. So that's why, like, when I look at the Australian Baseball League, and the more I go into it and learn about it, AJ, like, I feel like this is a rock that White Sox scouting should, turn over and see if they can find some diamonds. And as you mentioned, like, it is that possibility with the types of players and the caliber of players that have played in the ABL. Like, it could be a good place to find diamonds in the rough.
You're speaking my language. You're singing my song, Josh. And the White Sox actually had half a presence out here about 10 years ago. Adam Engel played for Melbourne, came out as a prospect, and Tommy Thompson was coach of Melbourne here. The White Sox had a bit of an affiliation with Melbourne, but Tommy Thompson was here on the back end of some, pretty public personal troubles. So it didn't work out all that well. But I agree with you that the Sox are absolutely burning talent down here. They need to have someone down here to check the Aussie kids. And you also touch on people like Skepton, but also Bazzana, and Oscar Hyde, who's a left-hand pitcher, has just signed with Oregon State as well in the last couple of days.
Nice.
There's a big, it's not a battle, but they're trying to make it a cultural shift from young, teenage, early 20 players signing major league deals and then kind of disappearing into the minors and being lost to the game, or going to college and spending that 4 years getting the education, but also, getting your baseball education as well. Because obviously here we don't have the pathways that will give you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of at-bats or innings, or whatever innings you need, and the biomechanic work and the fitness work and everything that comes with that. A lot of the time when our junior national teams go to those like under-18 tournaments and that, they're completely overmatched, particularly when it comes to pitching, because they haven't faced anyone quite like someone from Cuba or from Japan or Korea, or you name it, anyone with a sweeper basically. So right now there's probably 30, maybe a little bit more on major league rosters going through the minors and those sort of things, but there's another 100 or so in the college system. And that's where the advice has kind of been shifting from, hey, I signed a big league contract. I'm an 18-year-old. I've signed this. Solomon Maguire, who's on the books at the Pittsburgh Pirates, signed a deal for something like $1 million our money, and he was 17. Now, who's going to knock that back? He's not going to say, sorry, I'm going to go to college.
Right.
So those sort of deals still happen. There's still a lot of, I can't remember if it was Chris Burke or someone has signed with Cincinnati recently. There's still like the upper echelon of the talent is still signing with major league clubs. And I reckon I'm with you. It's a huge waste that the Sox aren't having a look here at the moment.
Hire 5 scouts, hire 5 Australian scouts. That's all I'm asking, AJ, and work the ABL, even follow the under 18 team, because like to your point, and we've been talking about him, with Bazzana, Travis Bazzana for Oregon State. I have the over under at 3,000 words, AJ, that I'll be writing about Bazzana this upcoming season for the 2024 Major League Baseball draft. And for White Sox fans, the reason why I'm going to write a lot about him, he was the Cape Cod League MVP. He hit 375 with a 456 on base percentage and slugged 581, with 6 home runs, 31 RBIs, and he has many walks as strikeouts using a wood bat. And he went to Driveline and shot this really cool 10-minute documentary on how he reworked his swing at Driveline and increased his bat speed by 5 miles per hour. So now his average bat speed at Driveline was 74 miles per hour. And disclaimer, I do vote for the Dick Hauser Award in college baseball. It is one of the player of the year types of awards. There's the Golden Spikes. That's like the Heisman of college baseball. I don't vote for that, but I vote for one of the player of the year awards. And Bazzana is going to be on my preseason watch list, AJ, just because of what he's already done at Oregon State, but what he did in the Cape Cod League. There's a lot of hype surrounding to him. And he's from Sydney. And watching some of the highlights as Oregon State shot a pretty cool video on YouTube about Bazzana's journey on how he got discovered in Sydney and how he felt, as he had baseball aspirations, as you mentioned, that the best way for him to succeed at the game of baseball and reach the majors was going the college baseball route. If Bazzana performs as well as expected, if he meets the hype this upcoming season, AJ, for Oregon State, and he gets selected in the first round of the Major League Baseball draft, do you foresee teenagers in Australia that are currently playing maybe baseball or part of the travel baseball team decide Bazzana is going to clear a pathway for us and we're going to follow his path and we're going to start playing college baseball in the States?
I think yes. For the reasons I said before. But Bazzana is an animal. He's you mentioned the driveline training. Yeah, he's committed to that all day, every day, those sort of things. So there's the model is there for the other kids who want to come through. That's what it takes. And speaking to a lot of the older ABL players, they say they would love to have something like that on their way up. This is guys who made AAA level and things like that. But they see these 17-year-old prospects come through the ABL and they're like, there's no Australian player anywhere near that. And how are you going to shape them up? Often it's through the college system, because once they're signing with an MLB team, it just becomes part of the thing. They don't know anything about diet or fitness or anything like that, like I mentioned before. So if Bazzana goes in the first round, the other tricky part for Australia is, yes, he's gone in the first round. Ideally, he falls to 5. He probably won't, but he'll go in the first round. That'll make the news. There was a really good profile here written about him by baseball writer Andrew Jackson, about 10,000 words about the whole thing. It was really, really good and in depth, and it got huge numbers. But if he goes in the first round, that's great. But then he kind of disappears unless he goes straight to AAA mashes and goes straight up to wherever he is. They probably won't track his journey through the minors. Sorry. So it's kind of, someone like Curtis Mead, who's at Tampa, won a lot of minor league awards as well. Came through. Now he's up in the big leagues. No one heard of him until he made the big leagues. So that's the kind of coverage, which is the problem. Unless he goes and mashes straight away, they'll probably just hold off on reporting on him or anything like that until he makes his major league debut. It's a strange system where you get drafted and then you kind of learn your craft, hone your things. It might be 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, before you go up. And it's kind of that's foreign to how things are usually done here. An 18-year-old kid who gets drafted to the Australian Football League will be playing that year pretty much every game.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So it's like American football as well. The guys that you're watching in college football, when they get drafted in the first round, you're watching them next year Sundays in the NFL. I mean, this type of system is kind of like with America and soccer. Like, we just decided the MLS does not develop international players well. If Team USA is going to be worth the damn, we got to send you away. We got to send you to Europe, even if it's the second division. Like, go learn, play with the Germans, play with the Spaniards, play with the French, play with the British. Stop playing in the MLS. Like, is that a fear in Australia? Because we have heard it is a fear, like in South Korea. In the Korean Baseball League, they allow each team to only sign 3 foreign players a season to make sure they don't break the KBO, that the KBO is still mostly made up of Korean baseball players. Is there that type of fear with Australia and the Australian Baseball League that they still want to make it as Australian as possible?
Yeah, there's definitely concerns with the number of imports that come across, particularly the independent ball guys or the American Association guys who come across and take a spot. Some people think, well, if it's a prospect from an MLB team, then fair enough. But if it's, some journeyman who's had 12 years and now he's coming down here just to have a game, then, that spot should probably go to a younger Aussie player. But a lot of the Aussie players who are in the minors come back for the ABL, either to keep up their at-bats or their innings, or even just to be around the teams. So it's the local contingent are really committed to it. And the way the league scales its salary cap, well, I say mockingly salary cap because, it's like 2 hamburgers and a bottle of drink. Lineups are picked on points. So local player, 0 points. So you can have as many of them as you want. And then as you go further down, if it's someone on an MLB roster, that certain number of points, then you can't go over a number of points to have your squad put together, your roster.
Got it. Okay.
So that takes care of that to an extent. It's a great proving ground for the young kids for those reasons I said before, that there's a lot of, there's grizzled veterans, there's up-and-coming prospects, there's Aussie players who are just trying to stay in tune over the Christmas break here. And it gets pretty stinking hot during the season here as well. So they'll learn about adversity. But there are concerns about the number of imports, but it's kind of counterbalanced by the baseball education that the Australian players are getting from not just Australian veterans, but those who are, living baseball every day, because most of the Australian players in the ABL, are apprentices. They work full time. They do all sorts of stuff. Steve Kent, who is a friend of mine, actually started that game against Cuba and got Yohan Moncada and Luis Robert out in the first inning he did. And he's a guy who works, he works a desk job day to day and plays baseball on the weekends. So, so
that's not good for Luis Robert or Yohan Moncada. They don't want to hear that. I like
to think Yohan did his back swinging hard at Steve, but yeah. But that's the sort of, younger players coming up need, a clubhouse surround and those sort of things. And there's a cohort here in Australia who are keen to just either limit imports as much as you can and let Aussies take the spots. But then you start to get into the viability of the league, because the prospects that get sent over by MLB are all catered for by their clubs. They bill it out to I could have someone living here if I wanted to, who was playing in the ABL. But it's a really tricky balance, because the ABL has gone broke several times before. And the version we have at the moment, Dave Nielsen actually tipped in $1 million of his own money a few years ago, probably mid-2000s, to create his own ABL called the International Baseball League. That fell over as well. In the mid-late 90s, the ABL used to have crowds of 15,000 people. They used to play in huge venues. It was broadcast live on free-to-air TV, which is absolutely critical here in Australia. Nowadays, that league went broke, then Nielsen's league went broke, then Major League picked it up, MLB picked it up around 2010, and that's the league we have at the moment, been going for about 13 years. Now, I'll just correct you slightly from what you said before, Josh. MLB picked it up in 2010 under a 5-year deal, and when that 5 years came up in 2016, they exited. So the league's on its own money and on its own legs now, and that can be really sketchy stuff. So they need to rely on those imports being paid by someone else to fill their roster to be competitive. If you follow, it's kind of a vicious cycle, because that's why that $600,000 I was talking about before that went to Baseball Australia, something like that is so critical. And why so much of the focus is on the national teams, particularly the men's team, because that's an Olympic sport, and Olympic sports in Australia receive much more government funding than non-Olympic sports. So every time they start to announce, well, is baseball and softball going to be in the Olympics, everyone here, crosses their fingers, eyes, legs, ears, everything to see that it gets through, because there's going to be huge money problems if it doesn't. So that's the kind of, you see the tightrope we're walking here when it comes to the game here. And our women's team missed the World Cup recently as well, bombed out in the qualifiers, which is an absolute disaster as well, because they need the points for the WBSC ranking, but being able to push that team to get more women and girls involved in playing as well, they're really trying to make a concerted push for that. And missing the Women's World Cup is a huge problem.
Yeah, Paris, France decided they didn't want to build baseball and softball diamonds. So they replaced baseball and softball in 2024 with breakdancing.
Yeah.
Baseball and softball will be back in the Olympics in 2028 when Los Angeles hosts the Summer Olympics. And Bazzana is going to be 26. No, Bazzana will be 29, 30 years old.
Yeah. Hopefully the Sox will release him for that, but we'll see.
That's true. A couple more things like with Australian baseball, because like this pipeline of Aussies going to college, because I have this theory that we're going to see this with Korea and Japan, that Korean high schoolers and Japanese high schoolers are going to skip their national leagues and start heading to America, because it is the loophole. If you get drafted in the MLB draft because you went to college in the States, then you don't have to wait to be posted like Shohei Ohtani did, or Yoshinobu Yamamoto did. And you can get into the major leagues younger than having to wait until you're in your mid-20s and then have to wait to get posted by your respective team into the league. So is there a lot of competition for Aussie baseball players? Like, do they feel that heat from Japan and Korea that globally they're not very close to each other as far as countries, but in America, when looking at baseball, we just put those countries into the same region. Japan garners the most attention, then Korea, and then Australia. Do Aussies feel that heat from a baseball perspective, that they live under the shadow of Japan and Korea?
Yeah, well and truly. And that's why that win over Korea was such an important thing, because we go to all these tournaments, and normally it's Cuba we match up with. We play Cuba a lot for some reason. It always ends up being Cuba in a tournament, but we play friendly games against them too. We play a lot against Japan in various variations of our team and theirs. So the comparison, well, I won't speak for everyone, but the comparison I like to make is with Japan, particularly around development and those sort of things. But the scale is just not, it's not a competition. Japan, it's, national sport. Here in Australia, it's what we've spoken about. But I think the money Yamamoto got, and Ohtani as well, is probably going to push a lot more Japanese kids into college. But there's a lot of, they have a very entrenched league with very entrenched systems and processes. So, it'd be really, imagine the discussions from a kid saying, no, I want to turn my back on all of that and go play college. I think more kids will have to do it, but I think it's definitely something that is going to happen for the reasons you said. They don't need to worry about being put up for posting or anything like that, and all the politics and drama that comes with that. They're in control of their own destiny. And I think comparing that to Australia, it's our players need the access to those pathways and things like that, and that's why there's so many more going to college to graduate, education and baseball.
And then finally, how can Major League Baseball help with the growth of the sport in Australia? Like, it's been a minute, as the cool kids would say, AJ, since Major League Baseball hosted a game in Australia. And typically when they do, it's the West Coast teams that fly over a week before spring training ends to start their regular season. I believe Seoul, Korea will be hosting the Dodgers and Padres to start the year. I would love for the White Sox to participate in these international games. I'm not so crazy about the White Sox playing in London. Like, pass. The White Sox should play in Australia. So how can MLB help with the growth of the sport? And if the White Sox ever do play in Australia, like, what is the best city that they should play in?
Well, I'd probably say in 2014, Dodgers and D-backs played opening series here, a two-game opening series, and nearly 80,000 people went to that. It was at the Sydney Cricket Ground, where they play Aussie rules football and cricket, obviously.
Okay.
They fitted out. Find the pictures, find the video. They fitted it out like a proper ballpark, and it looked absolutely sensational. There's really cool like time lapse photography of the way they fixed it all up and made it the diamond. It was an incredible looking ground. So I would say you'd probably play there. A lot of the Australian football grounds can seat 100,000, 60,000, 80,000, but they're too big, they're too cavernous, if that makes sense. The Sydney Cricket Ground was perfect for baseball. It was a beautiful day. Everyone went and enjoyed it. And this is the other thing I'm saying about the latent support. I mean, you've got nearly 80,000 people there across the two games. Stadium was capacity both days. Team Australia played the Diamondbacks in a warm-up game and beat them as well, which got a little bit of a bump here. But here we are 10 years later, and there's been no more games here. No one even comes out here for preseason. A couple of the Korean teams come out here and do some training, do their spring training and run a couple of games against local teams and a makeshift Australian team after everyone's gone back to the minors. But I guess what I would say, the main way Major League Baseball could help is cash and broadcasting if they put it through MLB TV. Because at the moment, the ABL's broadcast on three separate platforms. One's Baseball Plus, which the league owns and operates. The Melbourne Aces run their own YouTube channel, and Perth Heat run something called, I can't remember what it's called. It's run through Channel 7 over there, one of the TV networks over there. So a consolidated streaming package, because they're never going to get the free-to-air coverage they used to have. But if MLB could assist with that and run it through their platform, that would be huge. Money always helps. It would cost them nothing, $1 million, but, that's nothing. Nothing.
It's nothing for Major League Baseball, yeah.
But yeah, it's just so hard to keep money in the game here because the talent seeps out to the other sports. It's, someone like Bazzana will go in the first round and then, there's no consistent rumbling along of players doing well or anything like that. I mean, when Hendricks came to the Sox and got 38 odd saves or whatever it was, they weren't like, let's compare that to Matthew Dellavedova in the NBA. If Hendricks came out, did a 5-out save, incredible game, blah, 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 nothing. If Dellavedova came out, hit 8 points, got 3 assists, and when he was at Cleveland, and Cleveland won by 20, there's an article, Matthew Dellavedova contributed to this win. So that's the sort of, baseball needs to break that ceiling, and it's really hard to do that. So I guess the first thing I would ask Major League Baseball to do is help consolidate the base before they start, demanding things like that, which is where a solid streaming comes in, where a bit more financial security comes in. The ABL clubs are run by license holders. Baseball Australia own the teams, but people pay money and they are the license holder. For all intents and purposes, they are the owner. And if they lose money or whatever, they go broke or whatever, then the license reverts back to Baseball Australia. And that has happened a lot. We were an 8-team competition until the eve of this year. There was a New Zealand team and there was a team based in Geelong, which is a coastal city here. But it was full of Korean prospects. Geelong, Korea, they were called.
Okay.
COVID kind of stuffed that up because New Zealand's an overseas trip. You need visas and all that sort of thing. And Korea couldn't send their people. So both of those teams are now gone. So it's a 16 competition. And license holders are really, if you thought Jerry didn't spend money, it's not that these license holders don't spend money, it's that they can't, because there's so much they're stretched so thin just trying to get a team on the ground that I guess more foundational cash would be generational. But I guess MLB would say, well, we already did that, and now you're on your own feet. But again, like I said, it would be nothing. It would be chicken feed to them to get back involved. But we'll have to see. I mean, MLB, they've got offices around the world. They got an office in London, one in Beijing, one in India, obviously one in Korea and Japan. They got nothing here. When they bowed out of their partnership with the ABL, the intent was that they would run like an academy up on the Gold Coast in Queensland. But that's neither here nor there. Nothing really. You don't hear players coming out of, I went to MLB Academy and here I am. The players still have to kind of stand on their own 2 feet. So we need help. I'll put that bluntly. And it wouldn't cost much. But I think also teams like the White Sox putting resources into scouting and that down here as well would make a difference too.
Again, if Bazzana wins the Golden Spikes, he wins the Dick Hauser Award, he gets selected in the top 5. You know how Major League Baseball is, AJ. Everyone is going to be like, we need to find the next Travis Bazzana. Yeah. Send scouts to Australia. These guys must exist. We've got to find them. It's just like with the NFL, one good Australian punter. Now every college seems to have an Australian punter. It seems to be like a pipeline. So it's all about trying to find new pipelines when you have restrictions in Korea and Japan. I feel like after this conversation, I'm sold. Australia is a great opportunity for Major League Baseball. It's a great opportunity for the Chicago White Sox. They just need to put in some effort. And again, if Bazzana has a great season, that could be the catalyst, AJ, for more interest, at least from the States, into Australian baseball.
Well, hopefully they get here. Hopefully they get here first after all that happens. But yeah, the kids grow up playing similar sport. Cricket's a very similar sport with the throwing and hitting. Well, there's just minor technical tweaks that need to happen, really. And you've got yourself a ball player.
Exactly. Well, you could follow AJ on Twitter. He's at AJ Mithen. And again, check out his show, A Sporting Discussion, wherever you listen to podcasts. And AJ, I'm really excited to visit Australia for the first time. I think we're going to meet up. You said you wanted me to bring Malort, and I could definitely bring Malort along. You are a sick bastard if you want to do a shot of Malort with me, but I could do that with you. And thank you so much for coming on the Sox Machine podcast.
No problems. Looking forward to having you.
And that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. We also upload our podcasts into our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. If you enjoy our videos and watch the videos on our YouTube channel, please subscribe to it. You can also follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Facebook. You can follow us at Sox Machine. You can follow me there at SoxMachine_Josh. If you enjoy our work and you want more, you can get more by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Our Patreon supporters get exclusive content and invites to exclusive events and ad-free versions of both the podcast and the website. Monthly plans start at $2, and you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball. I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.